Hey everyone, Joshua Gibson here, and you're listening to episode 60 of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. Before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to the show's sponsor, BarShield. BarShield created a maintenance kit designed to prevent rust and restore spin to a barbell's sleeves. My discount code, PWPodcast, will get you 10% off of your entire purchase. It will also help me to continue producing great podcasts with amazing guests. Head over to barshieldUSA.com, pick up a kit, and get your bars looking and spinning like new. That's it for the intro. Now let's get on to this week's podcast with Yasha Kahn. Welcome to another episode of the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast. This is your host, Joshua Gibson, and I'm joined today by weightlifter, coach, and according to his blog, a former sumo wrestler, Yasha Kahn. How's it going, Yasha?
Hey, Josh. It's good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. And you put a lot of digital content out there, and I'm sure listeners may be familiar with who you are, but I know there are some that may not be. So could you give us some insight into your background, who you are, what you've done, how you got into weightlifting? And obviously that's a lot to cover. So as concisely as you feel it needs to be or as drawn out, you have the mic.
I've been lifting weights for maybe... that's a tough question. And where do I start? I was a wrestler in high school. And in high school, the history teacher taught me how to do power cleans. And so for a couple of years, I was just doing a bunch of those. And then one day, I was already wrestling for a private coach. And I was at a local gym. And some guy comes up to me that doesn't speak a word of English, only Russian, and says that he's a weightlifter and he wants to coach me in weightlifting. I've never heard of the sport. Didn't know that snatch and clean and jerk were like a competition of any kind. And because he was much older, I had respect. I said, okay, sure, why not? And then he took me to a dirty garage gym because there was no other weightlifting in Massachusetts. And the guy that owns the gym, Donnie Venturoso, he just gave us a key. He said, come anytime. And then from that day on, for the last, 14 years or so, I've been going to that same gym for most of the time with my coach, Lev Epstein, who came up to me in that original gym. And here I am.
Yeah, so it seems like you have a very cultured background, a lot of different, I guess, life experiences that would kind of influence who you are as a person. So what kind of spurred that on? I mean, do you just have like a natural curiosity for, I mean, if people follow your blog, like a natural curiosity for traveling and new experiences, it's just something you tend to seek out or something that tends to kind of just happen to you?
I don't know. I don't know if everyone's like that or me. If you have access to good information and you keep, you meet someone that you're curious about what they know, you have some questions for them, you're going to keep asking questions. And somehow I stumbled upon some of the most knowledgeable people in strength. And that just kept going. So I kept asking questions, kept the discussions going. And I don't know if I have like a curiosity that's different from anyone else. I just had the opportunity to be around knowledgeable people and took advantage of it. And with the blogs, with all that, I think it was like I did a couple of years. So first I competed on a local level, the national level, and then at some point, like it just so happened that I got to do some seminars with big lifters. And then after maybe 2 years of those seminars, I realized like I have so much cool information that I think others would be interested. So I started writing those blogs, and the first ones were all like quotes from the big lifters. Kind of, this is what they said. And then eventually I ran out of those quotes and like interesting things that I can remember them saying. And from then it went to like if people asked me a question and I didn't know the answer to, and I was curious, I would go out of my way. I would do the research. I would ask whoever I can. A lot of them also didn't know the answer, but through discussion, we got to like some consensus, some answer that I thought was interesting enough to write down. And that was those blogs.
Yeah, and I guess you probably have a similar story for getting into coaching, right? The opportunity kind of presented itself, but you were an athlete for a while, and I'm not sure if people have followed your weightlifting career thus far, but competed at national meets and placed. Mm-hmm. So how was that transition from athlete to coach, and what were a few of the learning opportunities that kind of took place that forced you to look at the sport a little bit differently, because it is different competing and then coaching weightlifting?
So as soon as I started lifting, maybe within a year I started coaching, just because it was like there was no formal coaching at the gym. It was a bunch of people experienced, some extremely experienced and some not experienced at all. Everyone coached everyone. And like just in our gym on a regular basis, we have Donnie Venturosa that's been lifting for half his life, if not more. Dennis Reno, who's always on the at the national, international competitions. Lev Epstein. I completely forgot what the question is. I just started rambling.
Oh, so what were a few of like the learning curves when you transitioned?
So I started coaching right away just because people had questions, and I was like, try this, try that. And it was kind of like the more experienced lifters always mentored the less experienced lifters. And from the very beginning, I was coaching. And then when I was maybe 28, 29, and I had the opportunity either to keep training, and I knew that if I trained as hard as I could, I might gain another 5-10 kilos on my total, realistically. That would not improve my standing nationally. That would not put me on the world stage. And is it worth, at that point I was thinking, is it worth it for me to put in another like full-time year of training to get results that I'm not going to be more proud of having put in? And at that point, I just made the, I guess, adult decision of I'm going to pull back from training. I'm going to keep working out. I'm going to stay in shape. I'm going to keep refining my skill. But the amount of time that I'm going to invest is going to decrease. But I still want to be a part of the sport. I love the sport. I love the people. I am challenged by it, like on a mental level, logical level. So I kept coaching so I can stay in it and keep practicing through that.
Okay. And as an athlete, this might be a tough question, but what were some of the best memories, maybe one or two, and then what were some of the worst memories?
Best memories, I think, like I want to say like on a podium, but in reality, just the friends, the every day going to the gym and looking forward to it, not just because of the goals I had, but the friends that were in the gym. Like I knew that I was going to go there. Everyone's happy to see everyone. It's its own little community. Everyone hustling, trying to do their best. And the worst, probably the same. Bad moments at the gym when I was overtrained, like noticeably, like crying, tearing up in front of my idols of weightlifting when I'm like they're pushing me as hard as they can and I'm just breaking down. Those moments. Also, the anxiety from competing, knowing that okay, I have a competition in a month, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, and things are just not shaping up how they're supposed to. And I had these big plans for the competition that's coming up. But that's part of the sport. Like I'm happy that all of those things happened, but in the moment they weren't the happiest.
So you kind of, as an athlete, you develop an understanding of the lifts, and then as a coach, I think teaching them, you develop a different understanding. How has your view or process of teaching the snatch, clean, and jerk changed throughout your
completely
competing and coaching career? Yeah, so I'm interested to hear about
that. When you're lifting, you know how your body works. Now there's just a lot to say about this. So on the one hand, usually when lifters start to coach, they coach the way that they lifted, the technique and positions that apply to their strength and their body composition, their limb lengths. And then you try to put someone else in those same positions, and you're thinking logically, I know this works because I've done it, but in reality it doesn't work because They have a different physique. They have different everything. And that was a big realization that I think happens to every athlete that becomes a coach. It's not, no lifters are the same. Few lifters are the same. Also, if you're trying to teach something, that's the best way to actually learn it, because you have to explain it. If you yourself can't convince yourself of the logical approach that you're trying to put down, then you're going to have to, rethink it, reword it until you can say that, okay, I'm going to write this down, or I'm going to say this. And there's no argument to it, because it's logical. It makes sense. And when doing that, I had to go through a lot of steps and realizing, okay, so I saw it this way, and it was right. It wasn't that it was wrong. It's that it was right, but it was right because I am formed this way, and another lifter is going to look very different when the bar is in this position. But these additional things are all the same. Like, for example, when the bar is at the knee, the shins have to be perpendicular to the ground. The weight should be on the midfoot. Shoulders should be rolled forward, regardless of your body structure. Those things have to be the same. But if your femurs are much longer, then your back is going to be much more horizontal. But trying to place someone in a more vertical position when the bar is at the knee, if they have very long femurs, is just going to push the bar really far forward. So a lot of things realizing a lot of things, that there are things that apply to everyone, but not everything does, and understanding what is important and what is specific to each lifter.
Yeah.
Those things were defined over time.
I personally had that similar realization. I have a very short torso and very long legs, so I can get over the bar really well. And the first person I started working with is the exact opposite. She's like 5 foot, all torso, very short legs, and her pull looks completely different. But like you said, the foundational aspects of it look the same. It's just how we're positioned, I guess, in space that might appear to be different. So, and if you always try and push that, it tends to just end in a negative result. Now, I'm curious about the pull. After reading your blogs and hearing you talk, you've transitioned to understanding the lift is using more of the upper body through the top of the pole. And I hear coaches, not only in the U.S., but they talk about just finishing and getting under as quickly as possible. You're not actually trying to elevate the bar anymore after it reaches the hip. So what are your thoughts on the differences in the type of pull? And do you feel that, I guess you could classify it as the Russian approach, with just having a stronger pull after the finish, is more correct or less correct depending on the person?
No, I think it's more correct. I think getting the so regardless of, so let's say for the snatch, regardless of even it's a full snatch, power snatch, muscle snatch, the upper body should work the same. So if we don't look at what the legs are doing, the upper body, you're still, as soon as you make contact, the traps go up, then the elbows go up. Ideally for the forearms to stay vertical, get the bar as high as possible, and then without the elbows going down, put the get the forearm up so that the arm is stretched out behind you. The only difference is at what point do your legs start to bend and go back down. So in either case, it's still the upper body's working as hard as you can. It's just a matter of, is it working to pull the bar higher, longer, or is this already on the way down, the pull under? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you always want to work on that strength, because building more strength there is either going to get the bar higher or get you to go under faster. So with the very lightest weight, if you're hitting it with the hips and then dropping under as fast as you can, you're not going to build much strength for the overhead position, because you're just dropping. But if with all weights you continue to pull as much as you can with the arms, they're going to develop. And that's going to be beneficial for whether you want to do a long pull or not.
Is there like a visual cue that you kind of know once you reach this point, you should be transitioning under the bar, so that you're not cutting your pull short or staying up top too long?
Yeah. So, of course, on video, this would be easier.
Yeah.
But so the ideal is keep your forearm vertical for as long as you can. When you're not able to keep the forearm vertical, that's when you go down.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And that applies to all of those, the snatch, the muscle snatch, the power snatch. Keep pulling as high as you can. With heavier weight, you're not going to get the elbow that high. So the forearm's going to start to get more horizontal earlier. So you go down earlier. With a power snatch, you'll be able to get it a little bit higher because the weight's going to be less. Get it higher, and as soon as you can't do that anymore, go under. Muscle snatch, exactly the same. Muscle snatch, the elbow's going to go probably close to above the head. Only at that point you come down from the toes. And that coming down from the toes onto the flat foot is the same thing as coming down from the extension of the pull on the power snatch or the full snatch.
And I've noticed that just, again, looking, I'm going to reference your material a lot, but looking at kind of what you prescribe, there are a lot of muscle snatches and no contact muscle snatches and variations. How often or how frequently are those programmed in? And I guess what would be like a commonly prescribed percentage rep range, and is it typically before the competition lift? Is it on a different day? Like how do you write that into a program?
So depending on the phase, how far you are from competition. So the further you are from competition, the more of those like more circus act lifts they're going to be in there. And like the day of competition is just a snatch and clean and jerk. A month away from that is a few variations and maybe some sets of 2 or 3. A month before that, you can have a lot of variations, muscle snatches and all this. Snatch without moving feet from the blocks. The further away you get from competition, the more variation there is, like I said. And at that point, you're trying to also build technique. And with the snatch and with the clean, if you can hit the bar really hard with your upper thigh, with your hips, then you're not going to have to use the upper body for the pull because you're going to have so much momentum. And because that you don't build the strength in the upper body to finish that pull, those extra few inches that you can get from the developed upper body makes a difference between winning and not winning. And the muscle clean, the muscle snatch, all those lifts without contact force you to complete the long pull without ever not needing to do a single part because of the extra momentum. And so we do those typically to warm up for the snatch, for the clean in the base phase during the volume phase, but not every day, maybe once or twice a week. We do the muscle variations just so that people don't concentrate on just the violent hit and that's it.
Do you feel like there are other variations of the competition lift that are useful regardless of a person's strengths and weaknesses? Obviously, the sport's very individual in how you program for someone or how their technique may look. But do you feel there are variations that, regardless of their strengths and weaknesses, you would program in because they're so beneficial? So, if, for example, the no contact muscle snatch or maybe something without foot movement or something like that.
I mean, all of those exercises will either build some strength or remedy some like bad timing, bad technique. So usually they're done to offset problems. But at the same time, like just doing snatch and clean and jerk gets really monotonous if that's all you're doing. And there's, you're battling what you perceive are your abilities. So if you are set at, I have a 100 kilogram snatch and I just cannot surpass it, then like you shouldn't just keep doing snatches to try to, get 101 because, your mind is just not letting you. And whenever you get to 95 kilos, you're still, your mind is in your way. So a good way to go around it is, in Russian, it's called hidden 100%. So it's exercises that are a little bit harder, that if you do 90% of your snatch in that exercise, that's actually the equivalent of, let's say, 100 or 105% of your full snatch. So, for example, for some people, snatch from deficit at 90% is harder, meaning it's more work than snatching 100. So you put in a lot of those so that physically they're actually doing more than their maximum snatch. so that when they keep coming back to that maximum snatch, you know for a fact that strength-wise they have it because they've done all these exercises that are harder at slightly lower weights.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I have two questions for that. There's a Dmitry Klokov quote. I think he said that Americans lift off of blocks, Russians lift on blocks or on a deficit. What's the utility of a deficit variation? Why is it used, and what does it help correct or strengthen?
So the very, very beginning of a lift is when there's a lot of things that are shifting for a lot of lifters. Like a lot of people, they shoot their hips back right away, or they try to bring the bar in, and there's just so much change that there shouldn't be. And if you lift from deficit, then you place the actual height where you would start from the platform, which is, let's say, 1 inch into the deficit lift. You put yourself in tension. You already put yourself in a position where you're supposed to be, instead of the position that's comfortable that then has to transition into the position that you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's first. Also, you get to build the legs more because the legs are more involved. You have to pull for longer.
Okay. And looking at programming, I guess you kind of touched on it.
Sorry. One step back. Sorry. One more thing about it.
Oh, you're fine.
So if you're standing on the deficit board and you have a weakness from the very start of the lift, a lot of times like that's why people position themselves in one position and then quickly move out of that position the moment the lift starts. If you're lifting from the deficit, so slightly below where you would start otherwise, you get to strengthen that part, the very start.
Okay. So looking at these variations, and like I said, you kind of touched on it earlier with how you would set up a plan leading up to a competition. What is your programming philosophy, or what does that look like if you could kind of break it down into furthest away from a meet, kind of intermediate to the meet, and then right before?
It's evolving. Like it changes. My idea of what the best programming is changes from time to time. It depends on who the lifter is, what level they are. Higher level athletes can train much more than lower level athletes. But in like the general form, the furthest away from competition is, I guess, the training to train phase, where you have to get the endurance so that when you do get to the base phase, where it's a lot of volume, you're not quitting halfway the 5 sets of 5. And so that you can continue to train, and your sessions during the base phase don't take 4 hours, but take an hour and a half. So during that train to train phase, there's running, there's biking, there's swimming, there's jumping, there's very light lifting just for technique. Just everything you can do to get in shape so that you're in the best shape you can be for the really hard phase ahead. Then at that lasts between 1 and 3 weeks, depending on what shape someone's in. Like if you're in really bad shape, then you have to, before lifting any weight, you have to get in shape. You have to be an athlete. Then after you're already athletic enough, we go into the base phase, and that's the longest part of the cycle. So if a cycle is 3 months, the training to train phase is 1 to 3 weeks. The base phase is 8 weeks or so, between 7 and 9 weeks. And that's the phase where the goal is to lift as much volume as you can, build technique, and build strength without ever necessarily going for PRs, without going for single rep PRs. And the further you are from competition, so at the beginning of the base phase, we do as many different variations as possible, so that if, let's say, the snatch looks fine, but there's something off on the finish, you do 10 other exercises for the snatch finish. You identify which one just looks the worst. You fix that one, likely fixing the weakness or the timing. And once that one exercise that was the weakest gets strong enough, you can transition and see what's the next weakest part of the snatch and address it by doing those supplementary exercises identifying and then fixing, strengthening the weakest part of the snatch. Same for clean and jerk, same for squats. So that, like at the beginning of the base phase, the weights are relatively low, the reps are relatively high. By that I mean maybe 65 to 75% in the weights, and reps would be up to 6 or 8 reps per set. And that includes snatches, maybe sets of 4 snatches, clean and jerks, just so that you can see where the weaknesses come up. And then as the base phase progresses, you decrease the number of assistance exercises or supplementary exercises, just because you've already strengthened them. You're good with those additional things. You don't have to do them anymore, and you still keep focusing on snatch and clean and jerk, which you should do once a week, at least once every other week, like the classic lifts, so that you can assess what the weaknesses are, what the problems are with form, with timing, and then identify the exercises that would be best to fix those and the additional exercises that the lifter is the weakest at, and keep pushing those until you get to the end of the base phase, where all you need to do is pretty much just snatch and clean and jerk, maybe sets of 2 or 3. And there's no other exercises that you need to do, because every weak exercise was strengthened. Every weak point of the snatch and clean and jerk was already addressed by those other exercises. And then you enter the competition prep. And during the competition prep phase, at first you need to test out the snatch and clean and jerk for most people, not everyone. So first you test out the clean and jerk, maybe 3 weeks out from competition. 2 weeks out of competition, you test the snatch. And then you just start tapering for the day of competition. And in those couple weeks, the competition prep, main exercises pretty much only snatch, clean and jerk, and squats. Reduce from 2 or 3 reps per set to singles towards the end, just so that all the whole body of work that you put in during the base phase at slightly lower weight, you can then transition into highest weight, lowest reps, getting ready for the competition, which is just 1 of each, 1 snatch, 1 clean and jerk.
And through that, yeah, that's a great answer. So through those periods, what does the frequency of the competition lifts or its variance, what does that look like? So during the base phase, how many times do you perform a snatch variation, clean variation, or a jerk variation? And then during the competition phase, is it every training session, most training sessions, and then do you split up the snatch and clean and jerk?
So my programming has been evolving, and I'm not set on anything yet. When I was doing the classic Russian Soviet system, we had, throughout the entire cycle, Mondays and Fridays are snatch days, which start with a muscle variation or some sort of warm-up, followed by the snatch or some variation of the snatch, followed by pulls, followed by something for upper body. Both Monday and Friday. Wednesday was clean and jerk, exactly the same muscle variation, then the clean and jerk, then the pulls, then some sort of upper body. Tuesdays and Saturdays were strength days, so RDLs or deadlifts and squats, whatever else. If you increase the number of sessions per week, then instead of doing Mondays and Fridays snatch and Wednesdays clean and jerk, it'll be Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays snatch in the morning, clean and jerk in the evening. And Tuesdays and Saturdays were strength days. Then I worked with some other lifters, coaches, Boris Shako and Ilya introduced me to their programming. And I took a little bit from everyone. Like I tried all the different programs that were recommended, and just I had to feel it out. What does it feel like before I recommend it to anyone else? And so right now I'm using kind of a hybrid of the Russian system and the Kazakh system. And Ilya calls the Kazakh system a combination, like a hybrid of the Russian system and the Bulgarian system. So it's somewhere in there. The approach right now is every Friday we do waves other than the training to train phase, we do snatch waves, usually classical lifts, sometimes like a variation, but something very close to the classic lifts. 3 snatch waves, 3 clean and jerk waves, 3 squat waves. On Wednesdays, we do it's a clean and jerk day. Mondays, we do a snatch day. Tuesdays and Saturdays is a strength day. And throughout the cycle, at the beginning of the base phase, the waves go up to maybe 80%, and then they increase the next week, 85%, the week after that, 90% for all the waves. Then we have 1 week that's deload, and then repeat the same thing, but 5% higher. And then next week, then 3 weeks in a row, we do that same thing of 85, 90, 95%, then 1 week down, and then 3 more weeks of just the waves going 90%, 95, 100. And then we're to the competition prep phase. We test our lifts, and we peak. And the competition prep phase, it's 3 times a week we do waves, classic lifts. So just, that is the competition, so that is what we need to do. And waves seem to work really well for building technique and confidence in lifts. And it gets you set for competition because that's the format of competition.
So just out of curiosity, if we're looking at an individual session where you are performing waves, is it something where you'll start the first set with a triple, go up 5%, do a double, and then 5%? Okay, can you break that down for us?
Yeah, only on the lightest weeks do we ever have doubles or triples for the wave days. It's usually just single rep for everything. So it's 75%, 80, 85, 75%, 80, 85, 75, 80, 85. If it feels really good, then on the second wave, you can go higher if you want. With that, it's surprisingly waves. I've used waves before. I just never knew the benefit of them. And so the reason why I use them as much as I do now is especially for remote coaching. If you do 70% snatches, the technique that you're likely using is not the technique you're going to use at 95% or 100%. Because, everyone wants their hips a little bit lower to engage the legs, and they feel the legs working, and they feel, okay, that's how the lift is supposed to go. But if the hips are down, the knees are going to be a little bit more forward. When the bar starts to go up, the bar's a little bit further away from you than it's supposed to be. And at light weights, you're still able to pull it back in because, the weight is either weighs less than you or not that much more than you at 70%. But when you get to 95%, 100%, the bar is still in that same position because it has to go around your knees. But if you were to try to pull it in, you're not going to pull the bar towards you. You're just going to pull yourself to the bar. You're going to push it further forward, and for whatever reason, you keep missing in front. But with waves, since you keep repeating the 85, 90, 95, you're going to stick to the technique that just keeps working on all the weights. And the technique that works on all the weights is the technique that works on the heaviest weights, which might not feel as comfortable as the lightweight technique with the lighter weights, but it's the technique that's always going to work. And with this, like with sets of 2, 3, 4, people sit down between sets, rest, socialize, talk. When we do waves, I tell all the athletes not to sit down, stay on the platform if you can. If you're ready to socialize, that means that you're ready to lift. So that the ideal is with, let's say, the day where you have snatch waves followed by clean and jerk waves followed by squat waves. Rush through the snatch waves. Don't sit down, get them all done. Then take a 10-15 minute break if you want. Clear your head, catch your breath. And then same thing, make it more of a sprint, a run for the clean and jerks. Rest afterwards, clear your head. Same thing for squats. And that way, ideally, finish the whole workout within an hour and a half, an hour and 15 minutes, instead of stretching it out for 3 hours.
And out of curiosity, you put up a really interesting post sort of like the rules for a gym, a weightlifting gym.
Mm.
I've talked to Sean Waxman and then Max Zeta, and they talk about the importance of culture within a gym. What's the culture you try and instill in your gym? And I guess this comes to like how people approach lifting, how people approach and interact with each other. Do you have like unwritten rules that you tend to try and follow and have everyone else follow?
Not intentionally. No, like nothing discussed, nothing written. But whatever gym I go to just ends up, if you're gonna be an asshole, then no one's gonna like you, and you're gonna end up leaving the gym anyway. If you walk in there, say hi to everyone, show respect, you're gonna be liked. You're gonna want to be there more. I think the environment typically builds itself. In weightlifting gyms, everyone needs a hand sometimes. Everyone needs can you take a look at this? Can I borrow your weights? Can I work in with you? If you're not respectful to others, then you're not going to want to stay there. They're not going to be respectful to you. And I think that builds an environment in and of itself. And so with that article, that was just quoting Boris Jaco, his rules. And for him, like it took him some time to write those down. I'm like, what do I really do in the gym? The big thing for culture was respect. Respect the equipment, respect the coach, respect anyone in the gym. And like, if you're going to ask for someone's opinion, then use it. Use what they say. The gym that I go to here in Norwood when I'm in Boston is owned by my friend Donnie Venturoso, who I don't know if he goes out of his way to make the culture the way it is, or it just automatically happens. But always when I walk in there, everyone says hi to everyone. And I know that obviously not everyone likes everyone, but you would never see that in the gym. You would never see someone disrespecting someone else, getting in anyone's way, prohibiting anyone from doing the exact work that they want to do. I think that's what's most important. And then, if there's one strict coach in the gym, then he has to have his own rules. But since we don't have that set of a coaching environment, we don't have those kind of rules. And same thing in the gyms that I go to. I live most of the time in New York. In JDI, there's almost no set coaching, but everyone that goes there works hard, knows that when they go there, everyone around them is working hard. And if you see everyone working around you as hard as you can, as hard as they can, you're going to want to fit in and do the same.
Yeah. You hear a lot of people say that, programming is incredibly useful and really impactful in terms of developing an athlete. But at the end of the day, the environment has a very large influence. How much do you think just having a competitive and training environment and having people with similar mindsets in the same room, how much does that attribute to someone's success, would you say?
Oh, very much. I can't give a percent, but a lot. I can tell you, so for the last couple months, Ilya was training in Romania. And he was there with, I think, 3 other Olympic champions. Mijat and the other 2 girls, I don't remember their names, both from Kazakhstan. And the coach that built all 4 of them, plus most of the best Eastern European lifters from the last maybe 30 years, has like a very direct approach on how to build champions. And he sets up a training camp somewhere in the middle of nowhere, so there are no distractions. And I want to talk about the environment. It's only a small part of what I'm about to say. So he sets up this environment, and he gives everyone the same exact program. And he says, if you're able to complete this, you're going to be the Olympic champion. And from what I've heard, like that's true. Everyone that's finished it becomes the Olympic champion, and those that don't burn out when they try to. And it's not that those that finish it are naturally physically more gifted. It's mostly mental. And the program is 3 times a day, almost every day training, where they wake up, they train, they eat, they sleep, they train, they eat, they sleep, they train, they eat, they sleep, and so on. And between sessions, when you're so worked up, like it's impossible to sleep, the ones that are able to finish the program are the ones that lay there and pretend to be asleep, force themselves to eat. And like, to me, that sounds like torture. Like just laying there every day, just pretending to be asleep for an hour or two between training sessions. And he gets the best lifters that he could into the training camps, and he gets the best lifters in the same weight class, ones that are competitive with each other, to lift together on the same platform, and pushes them to compete with each other. Not directly, doesn't like directly push them to say it, but makes sure that there's enough competition every day. And especially since they do waves all the time, they get to put on an extra kilo here and there, just to be able to say in front of each other, yeah, I lifted more than him today. And with that kind of environment of every single session, you have to win. And you know that you're gonna, and you know what you have to do to win, which is, both in the gym and then in terms of recovery. And nothing else matters other than, because there are no other distractions other than I just want to beat that guy next time. I think sets someone up for living the life you need to get the most out of it. Not just in the gym, but recovery and everything else.
Yeah, that's great.
I went off topic. I'm not sure if...
No, that was phenomenal. I'm sure everyone's going to love that. And now, I'm sure you follow Ilya and his recent performance, and you've seen him go from not being in shape, quote unquote, to getting in shape and performing at a very high level. Do you have any predictions for his performance in the next few months? Do you think he's going to make like this huge swing and put up a big total, or?
I'm friends with him and I wish him the best, and I hope he does really well.
Yeah.
I don't want to predict anything.
Okay.
He looks really tired right now, and I hope that he can recover and get back into training.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone really wants to see him do well, and we're all pulling for him. So.
Yeah, and every time that he's stopped lifting, it looks like, he can't really come back. Like it's, he had his time. And this time again, it looks just like that, where, everyone on like his competition is lifting more than him. But mentally, he definitely still has it. Age, of course, is going to play a role at some point. We'll see if it's now or if it's later. But a year ago when I was training with him, he was on fire. He was good. If he is still able to train the way that he was, then absolutely he can win. And I hope he does.
And I've had a couple questions kind of in the back of my mind while we've been talking. One is to do with, you talked about the hidden 100%. So I'm interested in knowing if you have any variations of the lift that are predictive of performance of the competition lifts. So like if you can hang snatch or block snatch or do some sort of lift with 95%, you're almost guaranteed for a PR without having to test the actual competition lift.
So if we take out the mental aspect from it, because some people are just afraid of that next little step. Just speaking in terms of physically able, absolutely no, I can't. Because everyone's so different. Like some people are much better from deficit than they are from the platform. Others from blocks. Like a lot of people lift from blocks, not because it helps to build strength or technique, because the technique you use from blocks differs from that same position from the ground, from the platform, but it builds confidence. So a lot of people are able to do 105% of their best from blocks because they use a technique that is better from blocks and is not really relevant from the platform. No, and some people can squat much more than they can clean and jerk front squat. Others can't. Like my front squat was at most 8 kilos more than my clean and jerk. But some people can do 60 kilos more. So I don't think that there are any predictive numbers. It would be really nice if there were. If you can just write out a matrix and identify, oh, that's the weak one. Automatically, that means that if I build that up, I will have a better snatch. But it's not the same for everyone. I think with me, I can't share my matrix of all the lifts with you, and you match all of those and expect to have the same snatch. It might be much more, it might be much less. Yeah. Okay. It would be really nice if there was something like that, but there isn't. It's like a nice, like in a dream situation, you can use that. It's not reality.
Yeah. So is it more so an approach of, instead of focusing on the lifts that you're very good at, it's focusing on the lifts that you're very bad at and trying to bring those up to a somewhat decent level or a comparable level?
Yeah. Yeah, and comparable level doesn't necessarily mean exactly 90%, just because someone else is doing 90%. It's proficient. Yeah. It's like, okay, now, yes, his drop snatch is as good as needs to be, even though it's less than others, but the form is right. He just doesn't have the same upper body strength, and he can't. Or, like, with girls can't have the same upper body strength for the most part as guys, so those numbers are significantly different on average, comparing, let's say, bench press to squat. If women were to try to increase their bench press to have the same ratio of bench press to squat as guys, they would spend all their time on bench press and nothing else. And everyone has different levers, different strengths. And so I think it's more important to see specifically the snatch and clean and jerk, identify what the weak points are, identify exercises that fix those weak points, and work on those.
Okay, and then the next question, and one of the last in terms of training and technique, when we're looking at the jerk, so the power jerk, split jerk, and squat jerk, is there a way of kind of predicting who would lift with one or the other a bit better, or is it just a matter of trial and error, or is there a body type that's more suited for a power or squat jerk?
No idea. Yeah, there probably is. I have no idea. Yeah. I don't know. I think that weightlifting is going to go through an evolution, is going through an evolution right now, where we're going to transition from the split jerk to the squat jerk. I think most of the next records over the next generation are going to be the squat jerk. Maybe not for the super heavies, but everyone else. Just like 60 years ago, whenever it was, we went from the split clean, split snatch to the full clean, full snatch. It wasn't overnight. It wasn't, someone saw someone do a full squat snatch, and then next day everyone was doing it. It took a generation to transition, and I think we're going through the same thing with the squat jerk now. That there is more potential in the squat jerk, but coaches need to learn how to coach it, how to program for it. Athletes need to get better coordinated, but the split itself, like almost everything we do in the gym is, both legs working at the same time together, from all the squats, all the push presses, all the snatches, all the cleans are all, the same feet, inline feet together. And then the one thing is one leg goes forward, the other one goes back. And so many people have a problem with that. But if we were to do more squat jerks, that would help all the other lifts. It would increase flexibility. It would increase speed and power, strength for those same positions that we're using in all of the lifts. So down with split jerk.
Very interesting. So if you had a new student come into the gym and you were going to coach them from the beginning of their career to the end, would you start them off with a power or squat jerk?
Yeah, I would. I don't know if I have the expertise to get more out of them with the squat jerk than with the split jerk, just because I've been doing the split jerk and coaching the split jerk for as long as I have. But I think it's the right move. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially a young lifter whose flexibility, mobility, coordination, you can still mold.
What are the difficulties of the squat jerk? Because it seems like when people that tend to perform it are less consistent at heavier weights, and I could be wrong, but that's just something I've noticed maybe on a competitive level internationally, tends to be a little less reliable.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the case?
It is. Yeah, it is. With a split jerk, if the bar moves a little bit forward, your body can move a little bit forward, which happens a lot, and that's a weakness or bad technique in the dip and drive. I think mostly because when you work at light weights, the bar moves slightly different from when it's at heavy weights. And if your upper back breaks a little bit, or if your knees cave in, then the bar is going to be pushed a little bit forward. That's not a big problem if you're split jerking because you can save it, so you don't concern yourself that much with it. So if you grew up split jerking, then the dip and drive is going to be the same for the split jerk, or for the squat jerk, as you've been doing your whole life. But those that are really good at the squat jerk are really good at the squat jerk, and those that can be precise and not push the bar forward are doing as much in the squat jerk as they are in the split jerk. Again, it's precision and experience. You can't do a split jerk for 10 years and then say the squat jerk doesn't work after half a year of trying it. It takes the same lifetime to build that technique and that strength as it does the split jerk.
Yeah, I've noticed also that when lifts tend to be missed during the jerk, it starts with the dip and drive. Do you use any variations of the dip and drive, or do you single that portion out during training? And what are your favorite variations if you do tend to use them?
So first starts with a front squat. The front squat needs to be really good. I like to get my lifters. I like to use the half-kilo plates under the midfoot so that you can make sure that the balance is correct. Because if the balance goes, then everything else might look okay. But the balance goes, and you have to make up for that somehow by extra upper back strength or whatever else. So I like to get people to do front squats on the half-kilo plates using straps, so that they're strapped in, which forces their upper body tight and raised. Then I like to do a combination, like a superset of push jerks, not push jerks, jerk drives, where you drive the bar up maybe to the forehead and then let it go back down to the shoulders. Do that standing on half-kilo plates, so never extending up on the toes. And that forces the bar to go straight up because you're pushing straight through the midfoot and you're not allowing the balance to shift at all forward. Superset those with either jerks or push presses at lighter weights. So maybe 80% half jerks on half-kilo plates, then get off the half-kilo plates and do 60% push presses or push jerks, power jerks, or split jerks. That way, with heavier weights, you're working on keeping balanced and getting the bar and your body to go completely vertically, and then doing the same thing a little bit faster with the full jerk. And I think for my lifters, that's worked the best. And it's not a one-day fix. It's a habit of none of the jerks, regardless of what the weight is, are ever allowed to go forward, or bar's not allowed to go around the chin. Everything has to be in line completely vertically. Yeah. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
I think there were a couple bullet points in the question.
Yeah, that was great. I actually made me wonder. I talked to Sean and his influence from meeting Tatiana Kasharina and her coach, and he said that now he's looking for quality of lifts and not necessarily allowing misses. Do you have a similar philosophy, having spent time with her? What's your take on missing lifts at the gym or lifting with a certain quality?
Yeah, Tatiana's a rock star. There are only a few lifters that I've heard that are like her in terms of being so adamant about perfect technique that, like, her coach doesn't write the weights for her either at all or until the day of, as he sees how she's doing based on technique. Because if she performs a lift and it's not with perfect technique, then what's the point? Because she's not building the right muscles, she's not building the right patterns. If anything, it's just going to tax her ability to recover in the wrong direction, I guess. If you're taxing joints, or if you're not getting the right muscles to work, then you might be strong in a position that's not relevant to the technique you're going to be using with maximum weights. So with Tatiana, she either lifts with perfect technique or moves on, because it's not worthwhile investment of her time, of her effort. And I think that's perfect. I think it's hard for most people to do just because of ego. You're at 70%. It's not perfect. Yeah, but I think I could do 75% better. And 75%, I got it, but it's not perfect. Yeah, I can do 85. And you keep going, and you get to 90%. You keep missing, and then you think, I didn't warm up enough. And then, you're 32 late to really back down if you want to complete the rest of the training session. You've put in bad work for whatever exercise you're on right now. That was wasted. You're going to be a little bit more hurt than you should be. You're not going to recover as well. It's just a waste of time. But if you instead always have a habit of only perfect technique, only building the major muscles that are supposed to be working in the right positions, then first off, you're not going to get joints hurting every day, which I know for most lifters that I've lifted with, that's a big problem. Like every day it hurts walking downstairs because of your knees, etc. And with her, she's the best. So I guess what she does, that also is a reason to follow what she does.
Yeah, I've had
Victor, yes.
Yeah, I've had similar discussions where someone will start missing lifts, and you'll watch them warm up, and the technique's not entirely correct, and you have to have that conversation of the technique won't fix itself when you go up to heavier weights. You need to make every single set leading up to that perfect, so there's no question you'll do things properly at 80 or 90%, instead of just kind of pulling and praying that it's somehow, there's that meme where it's you pull the bar, it gets to the hip, and then you're in the bottom, and some magic happened in the middle that you don't necessarily know how it worked, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. But it is difficult. So in America, we're in a position where the athletes, and this is starting to change, but the athletes we are getting are later on. They're older. They're much older, so 18 to 22. So we don't have time to necessarily develop them fully. So how much do you think, because we pull a lot of information from the Russian manuals and other countries that have studied the sport of weightlifting, but they have this whole developmental process. How much do you think it varies from what they've written and how they discuss it to how we incorporate that with older athletes who may have 5 to 10 years to develop or reach their peak?
So a lot to say about that. So first, during the Soviet Union, up until 1990, the Soviet Union invested a lot of money into developing athletics, the program, the system, the athletes, all of that, the research that went into it. There were scientists that were PhDs in a small part of the Snatch, in programming for a specific age group, etc. But then in 1990, they stopped making those investments. The Soviet Union fell apart, and since then, Russia's been using pretty much the same materials that were evolving up until 1990, and then stopped almost completely. Very little research has been done since, compared to every year before the collapse. And so, what is currently done in Russia is outdated. Other countries are moving forward much faster. China, obviously, Kazakhstan, and Iran. They took up some of the best Soviet coaches from back then and continued with local research with pushing that forward. So in terms of what is the Russian system is an outdated it's what the Soviet system was, and it would be best if America looked not towards the Soviet system, other than just for like this is the history of weightlifting, but to the countries that are pushing forward. I'm not saying Russia's bad at weightlifting right now, but they're not on top. America's interpretation of what was happening in Russia, I think from the beginning was a little bit off, just in terms of translation. Some terms in Russian, when translated literally, don't mean the same thing as were intended. Other things about Russian culture are kind of like, this is obvious, you don't have to talk about it. While because it was not written down, it didn't become a part of the American system, including recovery and bathhouses, sauna. What is the lifestyle outside of the training hall? Like all those things that are as important as the training itself never really transitioned, never got picked up within American weightlifting culture, or at least until now. Now it's becoming more a part of it. There was one more part to your question.
So in terms of developing an older athlete,
yeah. And so again, the Soviet Union manuals, there's a lot of information about each age group for both boys and girls. What kind of stresses are the best investment? For some age groups, it's not worth it to do any strength training. So they just do work on coordination, endurance, mobility, things like that. I guess that's not relevant at all to us because everyone starts here at a later age. And because of that, it kind of becomes a very different sport, different strategy. Coaches that work with little kids, they know that they have the next 12 years of a growing child to work with, that they will get stronger every year, even if you do a terrible job as a coach, just because you're getting older. These are the things that can make them become much stronger in a certain way. But when you're working with 20-year-olds through 30-year-olds, it's a very different game. Not harder, not easier. It's just so different that it's not from the same playbook. Technique-wise, yes. Programming-wise, somewhat. But let's say what would be called a Russian master of sport. Most athletes that start at 13 years old in Russia become master of sport, and I'm just putting out a number, let's say at 17 years old. At 17, you have a lot of testosterone. You are at the peak of your ability to grow. In America, if you start at 20, you reach that level at maybe 27 because you grow slower. And at 27, you're not at the same level hormonally as a 17-year-old. So yeah, just the game is very different in terms of what stresses to put on, how to incorporate a Russian program for Master of Sport for someone at that age. Yeah. And because of that, there are other countries that have also done a good amount of research, have put up programs for college-age kids and slightly older that I think much more applicable than the Russian programs.
Okay, and we've covered a lot in terms of your coaching philosophy, I guess if we'd call it that. In terms of resources, if you were to direct people listening to read up on some of the material you've used and incorporated into how you coach, where would you direct them? Like what books or authors or coaches or people that have maybe influenced you greatly?
I tend to go for clinical studies more than traditional weightlifting resources. Like I use weightlifting resources to try to maybe get an idea of something. And then a lot of times I just don't believe whether it's like that is true or legitimate, and like I have to find other sources that way. In terms of like who to, so that's in terms of like old school like books, materials. I really like Tommy Kono's something to say. He's written, and Bob Takano's book was really good. But also supplemented with, do a lot of thinking on your own, research, try things out. If you have access to good coaches and good lifters, do listen to everything that they say if you respect them, if you think that they are wise in their words. But ask more than one person, because one person has their own experiences, which may be very unique to just their experiences, just their what they've seen and the athletes that they've worked with. And when I was doing research for different articles, I would talk to different coaches, and I think all of them knew that they were not the only coach that I was asking. And the discussion was usually ended, tell me what others say. Like Boris Sheiko, one of, if not the best powerlifting coach in the world, was really interested for me to share with him all the other materials that I gathered at the end of getting a bunch of research. And if he's seeking out information like that, then I think anyone that's seeking out information should do the same. Ask those that you think have the information, research, test, etc.
Yeah, I think it's reassuring. Something you said earlier on, that your philosophy, coaching philosophy, is always evolving. It's reassuring because it just reminds us that it's kind of a learning process, and there's always going to be new information that you can incorporate and use, and then information that you need to get rid of and scrap. Sometimes people feel like they haven't found the one system, and that's a problem. But in reality, I don't feel like you ever kind of pin yourself down to one system. It's always influenced from other coaches, other athletes, other experiences, not so much just something you can write down on a piece of paper.
I think that's like a big negative and a really big positive of American weightlifting, where like most socialist countries have one system, where regardless of like what small hole of Russia you come from, you're influenced by the governing body of weightlifting, where you're told exactly, not exactly, but somewhat, you get a curriculum, you're told like how to coach, which in some ways is great because everyone has a direction, some direction, but also restricting in terms of, we're told that this is the way to do it because academics said so. In America, we have, hundreds, if not thousands of clubs, where every coach is possibly doing some research, but definitely doing some of their own experimentation and trying new things. And if we could in America have some combination of those two things, where everyone has access to great resources and the ability to do things on their own as they are now, I think that is the next big. America could become the next big powerhouse of weightlifting or any sport if we have the combination of those things. So not being tied down to a system.
You would agree that the talent pool for the U.S. is I guess, good enough to
Absolutely.
develop? Yeah. So where do you see weightlifting going in terms of the next 5 and 10 years? Do you see a transition from who may be considered the powerhouse country or countries, and then maybe a few falling off a bit more with the improvements in the testing protocols and kind of retroactively testing and then suspending athletes?
I think retroactive testing is going to let richer countries get away with continuing to do what all countries do. I think CrossFit is at a plateau. It's going to start going down over the next 5 years. So we're going to get a good amount of new lifters, but after that, in America. But after that, it's going to start to decrease in the number of new lifters being introduced to weightlifting. If we can use this surge that we have right now, like when I started lifting, 14 years ago now, we had one meet in New England per year. Now we have, and there was almost only masters lifters and maybe 14 lifters, like average per meet. And now we have waiting lists for the meet every month. We're surging right now in the number of lifters. If we can use this surge to get weightlifting onto the mainstream, into more colleges, make it a scholarship sport so that parents see a incentive in sending their kids to weightlifting. If we can incorporate it into more schools, get more PE teachers to know how to teach it, then we can do a lot of damage on the international stage. But if we keep getting kids at 20 years old, then, a lot of them, their strength is not going to increase by much, realistically. The best powerlifters, they started strong, they got a little bit stronger. If they start at a later age, that's most. You're not going to gain that much more strength. You can improve technique, but that's also limited in terms of what countries are going to be on top. Maybe the South America is going to start doing much better. Mexico. Europe, I don't think is. Russia's going to be in decline. I think Kazakhstan's going to pull out money from the sport because of the bad press. China's going to continue to dominate. North Korea, who knows what's happening there. Yeah.
Okay. It's always insightful to get someone's opinion who's as experienced and as knowledgeable as you are. And I know we've been going for quite some time now, so I would like to kind of wrap up just to respect the amount of time you've already given me. So I have a couple questions I ask everyone that comes on the show. I think they're insightful to kind of who you are as a person, and they're a little more the philosophical side of everything. So what is the worst mistake you've made as an athlete and or coach, and then how would you advise people avoid that mistake?
As an athlete, not taking breaks. I would train for years at a time, never missing a single session, going 5 to 6 times a week, through injury, through overtraining, through all that. And if I took breaks, I would lose, a little bit of strength. It would come back quickly, but I never did. And I absolutely should have. I would have been stronger, crisper, everything. And I advise everyone to take at least a month off every year and a week off after every competition, just to realize that why you like weightlifting. Want to go back to the gym. As a coach, sometimes athletes says that they want to do something, and I'm like, if you want to do it, go ahead. When it would be better if I was more strict and say, like, no, my responsibility is making you a better weightlifter, not making you enjoy yourself more today. And you should do this instead of what you want to do. There's a lot of times, especially when I started and was responsible for athletes, I was more worried about them being happy than them being happy in the long term.
So I'm just listening to that. When you have an athlete that wants to take their weightlifting to the highest level that they can, how much of the other aspects of performance, such as nutrition and recovery, do you tend to try and influence, or how much do you kind of direct them when it comes to nutrition and recovery? Because I feel like that's where the major differences are. I mean, we can all write a training program and athletes will follow it relatively well, but then what they do outside of the gym, the other 20 hours of the day, 22 hours, plays an incredible impact. So what's your approach to having that conversation with them and kind of getting them to get the most out of what they can do?
So I don't do enough of that. I don't talk enough about nutrition or recovery. I try to at least once a cycle for online athletes, write it out. For in-person athletes, talk about their responsibilities outside the gym, what works, what I recommend, a list of supplements that I would recommend, how much sleep, when to sleep, active recovery, bathhouse, all that. In the programs, I write in when to rest, when to do active recovery, when to go to the sauna. It's incredibly important. About nutrition, I'm not knowledgeable enough about it. but I have friends that are, so I asked them to write something up to talk about it. But absolutely, it's really important. And one of the things that I do is I ask all athletes to tell me how fatigued they are at the end of every session. And if they get too fatigued, I tell them what they need to do in terms of both, first, improve recovery, and if with improved recovery they still can't recover, decrease volume. And for those that are obviously not eating what they're supposed to, there's so many resources about what is good nutrition, what isn't, and what is currently like the fad in America would be kind of laughed at by the best athletes in the world. At the same time, what the best athletes in the world eat, I disagree with. So I can't really, I don't want to say my 2 cents on nutrition if it's not set in stone. So, I give my very vague of this is what you should do. But what works best is for athletes that I know are not eating right, is I tell them they have to text me everything that they eat, which cleans things right up because their guilt kicks in and they don't want to eat. They don't want to write the number of Pringles bottles that they went through.
That's interesting. So it all comes down to accountability. So the last question, the last question I have before you wrap up, and this doesn't have to do with weightlifting or strength training, but just whatever comes to your mind is, what is one thing that people can do each day to become a better person?
Subscribe to Team Yasha. Now, become a better person. Don't be selfish. Go out of your way and help others. Make sure to help yourself. Make sure that you're happy before you make other people happy.
Yeah, I think that's huge, actually, because a lot of people feel like they need to sacrifice a bit of their happiness or a bit of their life to improve others. But like, at the end of the day, you really can't do that unless you're fulfilling yourself in some way. And then you have the ability to kind of spill that over to everyone else. It's like that whole saying, like, fill your cup and then it'll runneth over.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's such a big question that you asked.
Yeah, it is. That's why I leave it for the last one.
Yeah. Let me give one more shot at that one. No, I don't have any more wise words.
So Yasha, I mean, I'm really grateful for the fact that you've given me so much of your time. Where can our listeners find you if they want to read about any thoughts that you've had, or want to sign up for programming, or want to maybe come train at the gym you train at, or anything like that?
So if you want to sign up for my online team, or want to know more about it, or have any questions about it, go to yashathoughts.com. Online team is one of the buttons on the front page. You can message me on Instagram or Facebook at any time, Yasha Kahn. What was the other one?
Oh, I don't. I think that's it. I mean,
I covered
that. Yeah, that about covers it. I don't know if you have any, like, besides your online team, if you have anything else, any other products, or I don't know. Discount codes are incredibly popular. I don't know if you have any of those or anything. This is
no discount codes. If you want to know more about cannabis in Massachusetts, then go to mcrlabs.com. I do that when I'm not weightlifting. And I think that's it. I don't have any discount codes. Yeah.
I will say that I went on your LinkedIn profile. I was just trying to get as much information as I could. And I saw that, and that was very interesting to me. That's actually where I got the sumo wrestler bit from. I saw that too. So what's the story behind that?
Sumo wrestling?
Yeah.
I want to sumo wrestle. It's a badass sport. It's if you were a wrestler before and you became a weightlifter, then you don't have the endurance that you did before, but you do have the strength. So if you want to keep wrestling where you need more strength, but the matches last only maybe 10 seconds at most, sumo wrestling's the place to go.
So just to clarify, they have lighter weight categories. I think most people envision it as just like two heavyweights colliding.
Yeah, they have 3 weight classes: light, medium, and heavy, or it's heavy, heavier, and heaviest. And yeah, you compete. There's nationals. You should train. If someone's in the New York or Boston area, then hit me up. I have my belt and ready to go at it at any time. If you're in Boston in the Massachusetts area, go to Norwood Training Center in Norwood, Massachusetts. Great gym. If you're in New York, I'm there most of the time. Go to JDI Barbell or CrossFit Prospect Heights. Both have excellent weightlifting programs. I'm there often coaching, helping out. And if I'm not there, still they have great coaches and great atmospheres.
Yeah, and again, Yasha, I want to thank you for coming on, and I'm sure our listeners have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know I have. If you guys did enjoy it, feel free to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Leave a review. It helps the show grow, and we can continue to spread the word of weightlifting and continue to bring on great guests and have great conversations. So, guys, thanks again for listening. Yasha, thanks again for joining me. And we will catch you guys next time.